A scorching desert can hide a secret garden beneath its sands. This is the story of the Subterranean Aqueduct, an invention so brilliant it built empires where nothing should have grown. By the end, you will understand how ancient engineers conquered the desert not with force, but with hidden rivers, and what their forgotten wisdom means for our thirsty world today. How did they find water deep under the rock, and what happened to the societies that relied on these vanishing tunnels? What does it take for a civilization to truly bloom in a wasteland? The desert sun does not negotiate. In the ancient highlands of Persia or the plateaus of what is now Afghanistan, communities faced a simple, brutal equation. Surface streams vanished in the dry season, and the shallow wells they shrinking table of water, a fleeting resource stolen by the relentless heat. Survival here was a constant race against evaporation, a battle where the enemy was the sky itself. The challenge was profound. How could you bring life-giving water from the distant, water-rich mountains across miles of open desert without it disappearing into the air or soaking uselessly into the sand before it ever reached your fields? Early attempts with open canals were a lesson in futility. In that climate, an exposed channel was little more than a long, thin offering to the sun. The solution required a radical reimagining of the landscape itself. It demanded moving the entire waterway underground. The genius was not in finding water, but in rethinking how to move it. The concept was deceptively simple. Locate a water-bearing layer of rock and gravel, an aquifer, at the foot of a mountain where it naturally surfaced as a spring. Then, instead of just collecting from that spring, you would tunnel backward into the hillside, directly into the heart of the aquifer. You would dig a gently sloping channel, a subterranean riverbed, that used nothing but gravity to guide the water out and down, following the natural incline of the land all the way to your parched valley below. This was the birth of the Kanat. Think of it as creating an artificial spring miles from the actual water source. The tunnel protected the water from the sun, and the gentle slope, often dropping only a hand's width every 100 paces, ensured a slow, steady, and constant flow. It was a shift from scarcity to reliability, from chasing water to inviting it on a permanent, guided journey. We can only wonder about that first moment of inspiration. Perhaps an engineer noticed how water seeped from a crack in a rocky hillside and dreamed of what would happen if that crack were extended deliberately for mile after mile. It was a leap of faith in geology and geometry, a belief that the earth itself could be persuaded to share its deepest secrets. This foundational idea, this act of sustainable extraction, did more than just quench thirst. It laid the hydraulic cornerstone upon which entire agricultural empires would rise from the dust. The true test of this idea came not in a blueprint but on the sun-baked plateau of ancient Persia. Around 3,000 years ago, here, the Kanat evolved from a clever local solution into the foundational technology of an empire. This was not a project for a single village. It was an endeavor of breathtaking scale, orchestrated by a society that understood its survival depended on mastering the hidden rivers beneath the stone. Teams of specialized workers, known as Muqannis, became the architects of this underground world. Their work began not with the tunnel itself, but with a line of deep, vertical shafts dug into the earth at precise intervals, sometimes just 30 paces apart. These shafts were the lungs of the operation, providing air, removing debris, and most crucially, serving as surveying points to maintain the tunnel's perfect, gentle slope far below. Imagine the scene. A Muqanni would descend by rope into the cool, silent darkness of a shaft, perhaps 20 meters deep. From its base, by the flickering light of an oil lamp, he and his team would begin carving the horizontal water channel, the heart of the Kanat, in two directions, back toward the mountain's aquifer and forward toward the previous shaft. The precision required was immense. The slope or gradient was everything, too steep, and the rushing water would scour the tunnel walls, causing collapse. Too gentle, and the flow would stall, allowing silt to settle and the precious water to become stagnant. Using only simple tools, a weighted plumb bob to gauge vertical drops, and water-filled channels to establish a true level, these engineers achieved an accuracy that still astonishes modern surveyors. They guided their picks and shovels by feel and geometry, creating subterranean rivers that could flow steadily for dozens of kilometers, all dropping perhaps only a single meter over that entire, incredible distance. This was more than just a public works project. It became a matter of state. Historians note that Achaemenid rulers, most famously Darius the Great, actively promoted Kanat construction as imperial policy. They understood a fundamental truth that echoes through history. Water security was political power, agricultural wealth was stability. By commissioning and maintaining these vast subterranean networks, the Persian state directly controlled the lifeblood of its provinces. The result was a transformation of the landscape itself. In the shadow of the desert, magnificent cities like Persepolis rose, sustained not by fleeting rains but by these permanent, reliable arteries. The water nurtured vast fields of grain and, in a profound cultural statement, lush enclosed gardens. These gardens, or peridisa in Old Persian, were living symbols of a controlled, fertile paradise, made possible only by the hidden labor of the Muqannis and the relentless flow of the Kanat. The Persian mastery was so complete that the technology itself became a key export. As the Achaemenid Empire expanded, so did the knowledge of Kanat construction. It was a peaceful, life-giving form of influence, a system that could be replicated anywhere the geography allowed. The Kanat was no longer just a Persian innovation. It had become a tool of civilization, a secret for turning barren land into a cradle of power. Yet this power came with a profound and delicate responsibility, one that rested on the shoulders of the communities who depended on these dark, silent tunnels. To understand its true power, we must descend into the anatomy of the Kanat itself. Think of it not as a tunnel, but as a hidden, inverted river with its own unique geography. This system begins at its deepest point, a place known as the Mother Well. This is the heart of the entire operation, a single, profound shaft dug straight down at the foot of a mountain until it strikes the water table. Here, in the cool, silent darkness, groundwater is first captured. The depth of this well is a testament to the determination of its builders, with some, like the ancient Garamantes Kanat in Iran, plunging over 100 meters straight down into the earth, a depth that still functions after 2,700 years. From the base of this mother well, the true journey begins. Workers would carve a gently sloping underground channel, known as the qaris, backward into the aquifer and forward toward the distant settlement. This channel was the hidden riverbed, often carefully lined with stone or ceramic rings to prevent collapse. Its slope was the system's genius, a gradient so slight you could barely perceive it, often dropping less than a meter over a full kilometer. This gentle decline used gravity alone to pull a steady, silent stream from the mountain's heart. But building and maintaining a river in the dark required a brilliant support structure. That is where the line of vertical access shafts came in. Dug from the surface down to the channel at regular intervals, these shafts were the lifelines. They provided crucial ventilation for the workers, a way to remove the excavated earth or spoil, and they served as precise surveying points to ensure the tunnel's slope never wavered. The engineering solutions employed were both ingenious and practical. To test for deadly pockets of stagnant air or to detect leaks in the tunnel ahead, workers might lower a burning torch or release a plume of smoke, watching how it traveled through the shaft. The maintenance of this fragile, buried world became a sacred community duty. Villages established strict schedules for cleaning silt from the channel and reinforcing walls, a shared responsibility that ensured the life-giving flow never ceased. This cooperation extended to the water's destination. At the surface outlet, known as the mashtab, complex legal frameworks dictated exactly how much water each family or field received, often measured by the time a small gate remained open. This intricate anatomy, from the profound depth of the mother well to the equitable distribution at the mashtab, reveals a society with a profound understanding of geology, hydraulics, and human cooperation. It was resilient infrastructure that asked for little but vigilance, functioning silently for centuries. Yet this very silence contained a vulnerability. The Kanat's success created a deep, almost unshakable dependency, a bond between a civilization and its hidden river that would define its fate for generations to come. But the story of the hidden river does not belong to Persia alone. Far to the west, in the heart of what is now the Jordanian desert, another civilization performed a similar miracle of water and will. Here, the Nabateans carved their capital, Petra, directly into the rose-red cliffs. To any approaching caravan, it presented an impossible vision. A bustling metropolis of temples, tombs, and markets, home to tens of thousands, thrived in a landscape of sheer rock and scorching aridity. The mystery is immediate and profound. With no great river in sight, how did such a city not only survive but flourish as the wealthy hub of ancient trade routes? The answer lay not in a single source, but in a masterful synthesis of every water harvesting technique known, crowned by their own brilliant adaptation of the subterranean aqueduct. The Nabateans became hydrological alchemists. Their desert received little rain, but when it did fall, it often came in violent, sudden flash floods that could sweep away everything in their path. Instead of fearing these deluges, the Nabateans learned to capture and tame them. They constructed a complex network of dams and diversion channels high in the surrounding hills. These structures would intercept the raging torrents, slow the water's destructive force, and redirect it into a city-wide system of channels and cisterns. But their true genius was in moving this captured water invisibly. They carved deep, narrow channels into the cliff sides, guiding water along sheer rock faces. They laid extensive pipelines of terracotta and stone, some buried, some built into walls, and in key areas they adopted the principle of the Kanat, digging subterranean conduits that protected their precious water from evaporation as it flowed to its destinations. This hidden hydrological network turned the entire city into a catchment basin and a distribution system. Rain that fell on a distant plateau could end up, days later, filling a public fountain in the city center or irrigating a hidden garden. Archaeologists have uncovered evidence of lush gardens and even small agricultural plots within Petra's confines, fed by this constant, managed flow. The system was so effective it created an artificial oasis, a verdant pocket of life sustained entirely by human ingenuity. This mastery of water was inseparable from Petra's power. Its wealth came from controlling the trade in frankincense and myrrh, precious goods that moved along desert routes. Caravans would travel for weeks across barren land, arriving at Petra parched and desperate. The city's ability to provide abundant, clean water was not just a civic service. It was a strategic commodity, a form of soft power that made Petra an indispensable stop. The very secrecy of their water supply added to its mythical aura and its defense. An enemy army laying siege to those towering cliffs would see no obvious source to poison or cut off. The lifeblood of the city was hidden in plain sight, flowing silently within the rock itself. The Nabateans show us that the principle of the subterranean aqueduct was not a rigid blueprint, but a versatile idea. It was one tool in a broader kit of survival, perfectly integrated with surface management to turn a fortress of stone into a cradle of empire. Their story is a powerful testament to adaptation, proving that even in the most improbable places, a society could write its destiny in water if it only knew where to look. A Kanat did not just deliver water, it delivered order. In the harsh calculus of the desert, where a single hour of unchecked flow could mean the difference between a harvest and hunger, the management of this hidden river became the very fabric of society. The technology demanded a social contract as precise as its engineering. Imagine a gathering at the Kanat surface outlet, the mashtab, on the day designated for water distribution. The community elders, or perhaps a specially appointed water judge, would consult ancient, unwritten codes passed down through generations. They did not measure water in simple volume, but in time. A family's share was defined by how long a small gate or wooden block remained open to divert the flow into their irrigation channel. This share, known as a sang, could be as brief as a few minutes or as long as several hours, and it was a right as valuable and heritable as the land itself. These rights were not arbitrary. They were often earned through the most vital currency of all, labor. A family's water share was frequently proportional to the work they contributed to the Kanat's original construction or its ongoing maintenance. If you helped dig the tunnel and pledged to clean its section each season, you earned a stake in its life-giving flow. This created a direct, tangible link between collective effort and individual survival. The entire village became custodians of a single, fragile organism buried beneath their feet. Every family knew the precise section of the underground channel they were responsible for. In the cool weeks before the planting season, they would descend into the access shafts to remove silt, reinforce walls, and ensure the artery remained clear. This was not a chore but a sacred duty. A neglected section could lead to a collapse that would starve the entire downstream community. This intense interdependence forged a powerful model of local governance. In many regions, councils of elders, informed by the expertise of the Muqannis, would settle disputes, adjust shares in times of drought, and organize large-scale repairs. A remarkable living example of this system endures today in Oman, with its ancient Aflaj channels. Recognized by UNESCO, these networks are still governed by community councils that meet to allocate water shares and resolve conflicts using principles unchanged for over 1,000 years. The technology, therefore, did more than irrigate fields. It irrigated society. It necessitated fairness, demanded cooperation, and rewarded shared responsibility. The Kanat was a silent teacher, instructing generations that in a land of scarcity, the community that tended its hidden river together thrived together. This social framework was the true source of stability, turning a collection of families into a resilient agricultural community, all bound by the common rhythm of a water clock ticking deep within the earth. Yet, for all their resilience, these empires of the underground river were not invincible. Their greatest strength contained the seed of a profound and unsettling vulnerability. The desert's most audacious challenge was not in Persia or Petra, but in the heart of the Sahara itself. In the vast, hyper-arid expanse of the Libyan desert, a civilization known as the Garamantes built an empire on a secret so deep it was essentially borrowed from another age. Their capital, Jerma, rose as a cluster of mud brick fortifications, a startling island of human activity surrounded by an ocean of sand. From the surface, it appeared as a miracle of stubborn survival. The truth, however, lay hundreds of meters below. The Garamantes had mastered a technology called the foggara, their own direct adaptation of the Persian Kanat. But their water source was fundamentally different. They were not tapping into a living, recharging aquifer fed by nearby mountains. They were mining fossil water. These were ancient, isolated reservoirs that had been sealed underground for tens of thousands of years, a finite inheritance from a time when the Sahara was green. With this non-replenishing treasure, they embarked on a project of staggering scale. Archaeologists have mapped the remnants of over 600 kilometers of these subterranean channels, a hidden latticework beneath the dunes. This engineered river system allowed them to transform barren pockets of the desert into productive farmland, cultivating wheat, dates, and even grapes in a landscape that otherwise offered nothing. Their hidden water became the source of visible wealth. The Garamantes grew into a central hub for trans-Saharan trade, controlling routes for precious goods like gold, ivory, and salt. Caravans that crossed the deadly emptiness would converge on Jerma, a reliable oasis sustained not by a visible spring, but by the labor of countless diggers who maintained the foggaras. Their empire was a testament to human ingenuity's power to reshape even the most hostile environments. Yet, this very success invites a sobering reflection. The Garamantian civilization, after centuries of prominence, eventually entered a period of decline. While historians note multiple factors likely contributed, from shifts in trade routes to social challenges, their story poses an enduring question about sustainability. Did their gradual fading hint at the ecological limits of mining a water source that could never be refilled? Each season of harvest, each thriving settlement, was drawing down a legacy that had taken millennia to accumulate. The Garamantes stand as a powerful dual symbol. They exemplify the breathtaking transformative power of subterranean water engineering, proving that even the deepest desert could be made to bloom. Simultaneously, their legacy whispers a cautionary tale about the precarious balance of building a civilization on a resource that flows from the past, not the present. Their hidden rivers were a triumph, but they were also a countdown clock silently ticking within the sand. The hidden river was too powerful an idea to remain a secret. From its Persian heartland, the knowledge of the Kanat began a silent, centuries-long migration, carried not by armies of conquest but by the footsteps of engineers, traders, and scholars. Its first major journey was westward along the arteries of the ancient Silk Road. When Alexander the Great's empire stretched into Persia, his successors, the Hellenistic rulers, encountered these subterranean wonders. They recognized their value immediately, adopting and adapting the technology for their own cities in the arid reaches of the Middle East. But it was the Romans, master engineers of the surface world, who became its most systematic students and propagators. In provinces like Syria and North Africa, where securing a reliable water supply was a military and economic necessity, Roman engineers constructed extensive Kanat systems, often calling them cuniculi. They applied their legendary precision to the ancient technique, using it to supply frontier outposts and burgeoning cities, proving the technology's utility far beyond its cultural birthplace. This migration was never a simple copy. It was a process of brilliant adaptation. Each culture that embraced the Kanat reshaped it to meet local conditions. In the scorching Turpan basin of western China, Oasis communities built the Khares, an identical system that tapped into runoff from the distant Tian Shan Mountains. The Chinese Khares turned one of the hottest and driest places on Earth into a fertile producer of famed fruits, its tunnels sometimes stretching over 30 kilometers. Centuries later and a world away, in the arid plateaus of Spain, Islamic engineers constructed the Viajes de Agua, or water journeys, to supply cities like Madrid and Granada. Here, the technology fed the exquisite gardens and patios of Al-Andalus, creating pockets of cool, fragrant paradise that became legendary. The pivotal force in this global dissemination was the expansion of the Islamic caliphates. Following the rise of Islam in the 7th century, the Umayyad and later Abbasid empires spread from the Middle East across North Africa and into the Iberian Peninsula. They carried with them a vast body of knowledge from astronomy to medicine, and central to this was hydraulic engineering. The Kanat was a practical tool of empire, enabling settlement and agriculture in newly conquered arid lands. Islamic scholars meticulously documented construction techniques in detailed manuals, transforming local craft into transferable science. As historian Andrew Watson notes in his concept of the Islamic Green Revolution, This diffusion of water technologies, including the Kanat, was instrumental in boosting agricultural productivity across a vast region from Syria to Spain. The hidden web of water expanded, connecting disparate cultures through a shared solution to a universal human problem. This silent migration reveals something profound. The Kanat was more than a Persian invention. It was a piece of universal technological DNA. Wherever the conditions were right, arid lands, sloping geology, and a determined people, this idea could take root and replicate. It was a testament to a shared human ingenuity in the face of a shared environmental challenge. From the Persian plateau to the Sahara, from the Taklamakan desert to the Spanish Meseta, communities who had never met were independently digging toward the same truth, that survival and prosperity often lay in following a hidden river back to its source. This created an invisible lattice of water and wisdom beneath the old world, a subterranean network of human resilience written in stone and flowing water. Yet, for all its global reach, this ancient marvel faced its greatest threat not from rivals, but from the relentless march of a new kind of time. The true magic of these hidden rivers was not in their existence, but in their motion. Without a single pump or modern engine, ancient engineers faced a profound puzzle. How do you persuade water to travel dozens of kilometers across flat, arid plains, using nothing but the natural pull of the earth? The answer lay in a principle so subtle it bordered on art: the mastery of the gentle slope. This was not about rushing water downhill, but about coaxing it along with an almost imperceptible invitation. The ideal gradient for a Kanat was breathtakingly slight, often a drop of only 1 meter over a full kilometer of tunnel. To put that in perspective, if you laid a 1 kilometer long board on the ground, you would only need to lift one end by the height of a doorknob to achieve that same slope. This precision was everything. A steeper slope would make the water flow too fast, scouring the tunnel walls and causing catastrophic collapses. A slope that was too shallow, however, would let the water stagnate, allowing silt to build up and choke the artery. The goal was a steady, walking pace for the water, a perpetual and manageable trickle that could be sustained for centuries. Achieving this level of accuracy over such distances, through solid rock and unstable sediment, required a fusion of observational genius and practical geometry. Before a single digging crew descended, surveyors would map the entire route. They used long sighting poles and simple water-filled trenches to establish a true level across the rugged terrain. By aligning these poles and observing the water's surface, they could trace an imaginary line, a hydraulic blueprint, that maintained the perfect, consistent decline from the mother well to the distant fields. The vertical shafts were not just for access, they were the system's calibration points. During construction, builders would lower weighted cords down each shaft to measure the exact depth to the tunnel floor. By comparing these depths between successive shafts, they could calculate the slope they had achieved and correct their digging direction in real time, ensuring the channel never strayed from its invisible guide path. This knowledge was so valuable it was meticulously preserved. Medieval Islamic texts on engineering, like those of Al-Karaji in the 11th century, contain detailed geometric treatises on calculating slopes and volumes for Kanat construction. They show an advanced understanding of angles and gradients, applied mathematics in service of survival. The system also included clever regulatory features. In some Kanats, builders would incorporate small, subterranean reservoir basins at intervals. These acted like capacitors in an electrical circuit, absorbing surges from sudden water table rises and releasing water steadily during drier periods, further smoothing the flow to the farms below. This mastery of slope was the silent, invisible force behind every flourishing oasis. It was the conversion of potential energy, the water held high in the mountain aquifer, into a reliable agricultural resource, using nothing but gravity and human cleverness. It stands as one of the pre-modern world's quietest scientific triumphs, a testament to what can be achieved when we learn to work with the Earth's most fundamental forces, rather than fighting against them. The wealth of the Silk Road was not carried on camels alone. It was grown in the shade of poplar trees, in orchards fed by water that never saw the sun. At the heart of legendary oasis cities like Samarkand, Bukhara, and Turpan, the true engine of commerce was not the market square, but the hidden lattice of Kharez tunnels beneath it. These were not mere way stations for dusty travelers, but sophisticated, self-sustaining agricultural powerhouses. Their secret was a brilliant symbiosis between the subterranean river and the surface flow of trade. The Kharez provided a constant, predictable supply of water, a rarity in the volatile desert climate. This reliability allowed farmers to cultivate not just subsistence crops, but high-value luxury goods that could survive the long journey to distant markets. Imagine fields of plump melons, orchards of almonds and pistachios, and the mulberry trees essential for silkworms. These were not products of chance, but of calculated hydrological design. The water from the Kharez turned the desert margin into a specialized factory for the Silk Road's most coveted commodities. The bounty grown with hidden water was then loaded onto caravans, generating immense wealth that flowed back into the city. This created a powerful economic cycle. Merchant guilds and local rulers, understanding this cycle intimately, became the primary patrons of the Kharez systems. They funded the digging of new tunnels and the meticulous cleaning of old ones, not as a charitable act, but as a direct investment in infrastructure. For them, water security was not an abstract concept, it was the bedrock of economic security. A clogged Kharez meant a failed harvest of silk or nuts, which meant a lost trade contract, which meant a weaker city. The maintenance of the hidden world directly financed the splendor of the visible one, paying for majestic mosques, bustling caravanserais, and centers of learning that attracted scholars from across Asia. There is a profound parallel here. The steady, unseen flow of water through the dark tunnels mirrored the vibrant flow of goods, ideas, and people along the Silk Road above. Both were networks of exchange, both were vulnerable to disruption, and both were essential to the idea of empire. The Oasis city was the node where these two flows intersected. Water from below nourished the goods that traveled outward, while wealth and knowledge from afar nourished the city's culture and power. This relationship transformed these hubs from simple stops into cosmopolitan crucibles, where Persian poetry could mingle with Chinese astronomy, all under a canopy of trees made possible by an ancient, invisible river. The desert empires built by the Kanat were, in their most glorious form, a collaboration between the engineer in the tunnel and the merchant on the road, a partnership that proved the most barren soil could yield not just food but legacy. But every empire of water was built by hands in the dark. The magnificent flow above ground was born from an unimaginable struggle below. These were the Muqannis, the tunnel diggers, a distinct class of laborers whose entire world was measured in shafts of dim light and the scrape of a pick against unyielding earth. Their work began with a descent, a journey into a realm of perpetual twilight. A worker would grip a rough hemp rope, his feet bracing against the cool, damp wall of the vertical shaft as he was lowered into the abyss. The world of sun and wind vanished above him, replaced by a silence broken only by the creak of the rope and the distant trickle of unseen water. At the tunnel face, the air was thick and still, heavy with the scent of damp soil and burning oil. His only illumination came from a small clay lamp, its flickering flame casting dancing shadows that made the cramped space feel alive and watchful. The heat was oppressive, a stifling blanket that grew heavier with every exhalation. In this claustrophobic world, the Muqanni worked in a perpetual crouch or even lying on his side, using a short-handled hoe to carve the channel forward, inch by agonizing inch. The removed earth or spoil was packed into leather buckets, sent up the shaft via a pulley, and emptied by a partner above, a cycle as relentless as it was exhausting. Yet the physical strain was only part of the danger. The greatest threats were silent and invisible. In some tunnels, naturally occurring gases could accumulate, odorless and deadly, snuffing out a lamp and then a life in moments. A sudden, distant rumble could signal a collapse further down the line, trapping a team behind a wall of rock and soil. In regions with unstable geology, a digger might accidentally breach a hidden pocket of water, triggering a sudden, violent inrush that could flood the tunnel in seconds. To navigate these perils, the Muqannis developed a profound, almost intuitive knowledge passed from master to apprentice. They learned to read the soil by touch and smell, identifying stable rock from treacherous, water-logged clay. The sound of a pick strike told them about the integrity of the ceiling. Before a dangerous descent, rituals of protection were common. A crew might share a brief prayer or sing a traditional work song, not just for camaraderie, but to listen to how the sound echoed in the shaft, testing the air. Their tools were simple, but their understanding was vast. This expertise earned them a unique social standing. They were not mere laborers, but respected craftsmen, their skills essential to the survival of everyone in the valley. A master Muqanni commanded high wages and deep respect, for he held the literal blueprint of the community's lifeline in his mind. Their work was a pact with the earth, a daily gamble where the stakes were a harvest or a hollowing loss. To walk through a sun-drenched oasis, to see the water flowing clear and cold from the mountainside, is to witness the end result of 1,000 such descents into the dark. It is a monument not just to engineering, but to human endurance, a reminder that the most brilliant systems are always, ultimately, built one handful of earth at a time by individuals who chose to carve light from the deepest dark. The clear, cool stream that emerged from the tunnel mouth was a miracle in motion. After its silent journey through the dark earth, the water now met the parched desert air, flowing into a wide, shallow primary basin. This was the moment of alchemy, where the hidden river became the visible lifeblood of the community. From this basin, a meticulously engineered distribution network took over, a hierarchy of smaller canals known as jubs that branched out like arteries into the fields. Each canal was controlled by a simple but precise gate, often just a flat stone or a wooden block that could be slid open or closed to direct the flow. This was not a chaotic flood, but a disciplined, timed release. The entire valley operated on a strict rotational schedule, a water clock measured in days and hours, ensuring every field and orchard received its fair share according to ancient rites. This reliable trickle enabled a sophistication in farming that seems almost impossible for such an arid landscape. Farmers could practice staggered planting, ensuring a continuous harvest throughout the growing season. They mastered the delicate art of soil leaching, using controlled floods to wash harmful salts down and away from the root zones of their crops. The constant moisture from the Kanat even created its own microclimate. The evaporation from the canals and the transpiration from the dense plantings raised the local humidity and lowered the temperature around the fields, forming a pocket of milder air within the harsh desert. This hydrological alchemy transformed access into abundance. A single Kanat could support a stunning diversity of life. Closest to the outlet, where the water was most abundant and clean, would be the household vegetable gardens providing daily sustenance. Further along the canals, orchards of date palms, pomegranates, and figs would thrive, their roots tapping into the steady moisture. In the outer fields, staple grains like wheat and barley grew, their success guaranteed not by unpredictable rain, but by the scheduled arrival of water. This system engineered more than crops, it engineered entire diets and a resilient food culture. The flood irrigation method itself was a stroke of efficiency. By quickly flooding a field through the narrow jub and then cutting off the flow, farmers saturated the soil deeply while minimizing the water's exposure to the sun and wind. Far less was lost to evaporation than if it had run in open channels across the surface. The result was a genuine food security built on a foundation of hydrological certainty. The hidden river's journey culminated here in the rustle of grain and the shade of an orchard, a final, beautiful proof that in the desert, the greatest power was not in hoarding water, but in sharing its constant, gentle rhythm with the land. The hidden river did not just feed fields, it sculpted cities from the ground up. In the traditional desert settlement, the Kanat's emergence from the earth was the foundational act of urban planning. The main surface channel, often covered with stone slabs, became the public spine of the community, flowing directly through the heart of the city. This was not a utility hidden away, but a central feature of civic life. Its path dictated the winding course of shaded alleyways, with buildings clustered close to benefit from its cool, evaporating breath. The sound of flowing water was the constant soundtrack of these narrow streets, a liquid whisper that spoke of life and order in the searing heat. From this public artery, smaller channels branched off like capillaries, diverting water under walls and through carefully calibrated openings to feed the private realms within. Step through a heavy wooden door from a dusty lane, and you entered another world, a secluded courtyard. Here, the Kanat's gift was received with reverence. A small pool or house lay at the center, often shaded by a slender tree. This was the home's living heart. The pool provided water for household needs, but its purpose was far greater. As water gently evaporated from its surface, it cooled the surrounding air, creating a personal microclimate of relief. This principle of evaporative cooling was scaled up into magnificent public architecture. The most iconic example is the windcatcher or badger. These towering, chimney-like structures captured even the faintest breeze high above the city, funneling it down internal shafts. As the air descended, it passed over a pool of Kanat water at the base, becoming chilled and moist before flowing into the interior rooms below. It was a form of ancient, passive air conditioning, a marriage of architecture and hydrology that turned homes into sanctuaries. This integration reached its most profound expression in the Persian garden, the charbagh. More than a mere pleasure ground, it was a philosophical statement in landscape form. The garden was laid out as a quadripartite paradise, divided by 4 water channels representing the 4 rivers of Eden. These channels were fed directly by the Kanat, their precise, geometric flow symbolizing human mastery over the chaotic desert. The garden was a complete sensory environment, the scent of roses and citrus, the shade of cypress trees, the sound of water flowing from tiered fountains, all made possible by the disciplined delivery of the subterranean stream. It was the ultimate symbol of the civilization's achievement, a living proof that they had not only survived the wasteland, but had carved paradise from it. Perhaps no city embodies this total integration better than Yazd in central Iran. A UNESCO World Heritage Site, Yazd is a living museum of desert adaptation. Its labyrinthine old town, built almost entirely of sun-dried mud brick, appears as a natural extension of the desert itself. Yet, beneath its winding lanes lies a complex network of Kanats that have sustained life for over 2 millennia. The city's skyline is punctuated by countless badgers, silent sentinels that have cooled its buildings for centuries. Yazd also showcases another brilliant adaptation, the yakchul or ice house. These ingenious dome-shaped structures stored ice through the blistering summer. In winter, water from the Kanats was channeled into shallow ponds to freeze overnight. The ice was then cut, stored in the insulated yakchul, and preserved for months, providing a luxury of cold in the heart of the desert. In Yazd, every architectural element, from the humblest home's courtyard pool to the grandest garden's layout, speaks a single, coherent language, the language of water. The city was not placed in the desert. It was organically grown from the desert's own hidden hydrological logic, a testament to a culture that wove the management of a hidden river into the very fabric of beauty, comfort, and daily survival. From the mud-brick labyrinths of Persia, the hidden river's journey leads to a land of rugged mountains and deep, dry valleys. In the Sultanate of Oman, the ancient Aflaj system is not a relic but a living, breathing institution. For over 4,500 years, these channels have carved a precise geometry of life into the rock, sustaining communities through a social contract as robust as the tunnels themselves. Picture a falaj, a glittering ribbon of water, emerging from a cleft in a mountainside to wind through a lush plantation of date palms. Its flow is not left to chance. At a central distribution point, a simple but ingenious device, often a sundial or a calibrated bowl that measures time by filling with water, dictates the rhythm of the entire village. This is the visible heartbeat of a civilization built on absolute hydrological order. The true marvel of the Aflaj is not the engineering, though it is profound, but the sophisticated legal and social framework that governs every drop. Water rights, known as athar, are calculated with mathematical precision, often based on the time a specific gate remains open to divert flow to a family's land. These shares are inheritable, tradable, and divisible, forming a complex economic system as real as any currency. The entire community is organized around the falaj maintenance. A council of elders, informed by the hereditary knowledge of the wakil, or watermaster, adjudicates disputes, allocates shares in times of scarcity, and mobilizes labor for the annual cleaning of the tunnels. This is communal stewardship codified into tradition, a system where your responsibility to the shared resource directly defines your right to its bounty. This deep integration of technology and law created not just villages but fortified centers of power. Settlements grew around the Aflaj, with imposing watchtowers and walls built not only for defense but to protect the precious water source itself. The ability to reliably feed and water a concentrated population enabled the rise of powerful regional imamates and sultanates. Political authority in this arid landscape was quite literally rooted in water control. To command a falaj was to command the loyalty of the people it sustained. The famed falaj al-Qatmin in Birket al-Muz, recognized by UNESCO, stands as a testament to this union. Its tunnels were hewn through solid bedrock, a monumental investment of labor that could only be justified by the certainty of a social system designed to protect and perpetuate it for generations. The Omani Aflaj represent the ultimate evolution of the subterranean river's promise. Here, the technology achieved a perfect, sustainable marriage with customary law and collective identity. It shows us that the longevity of such a system depends less on the strength of the stone conduit and more on the strength of the human covenant that surrounds it. For 4.5 millennia, through shifting climates and political winds, the Aflaj have flowed because the community agreed again and again to uphold the balance. They remind us that the most resilient infrastructure is that which is woven inseparably into the cultural fabric, turning a simple channel of water into the enduring pulse of a civilization. Yet this ancient pulse now faces a modern challenge, one that threatens to silence even the most time-tested rhythms. The flow of water demanded a flow of absolute fairness. In a landscape where every drop was a matter of survival, the communities built around these hidden rivers developed a mathematics of distribution as ingenious as the engineering that brought the water forth. This was a world governed by time, not volume. The most precious commodity was measured not in liters but in minutes. At the main outlet of a Kanat or a Aflaj, you would find the community's clock. This could be a simple, calibrated bowl with a small hole in the bottom. A designated timekeeper would place it in the primary basin, and the moment it filled and sank marked the start of a family's water share. In more elaborate systems, a sundial's shadow moving across marked stones dictated the schedule, or a clepsydra, a water clock with a regulated drip, ticked away the hours of irrigation. A share might be known as a jarib or an athar, a unit representing a specific window of access to the flow. This created a precise, rotating calendar for the entire valley, a hydrological timetable that everyone understood and respected. What's fascinating is that these water rights were often completely separate from the land itself. You could own a field, but you might have to purchase or inherit the right to water it for a set time each week. This turned water into a liquid currency, a tradable commodity that created a complex local economy. Shares could be divided among heirs, sold in times of hardship, or leased to a neighbor. This system required meticulous record-keeping and trusted officials. A village scribe would maintain detailed ledgers of who owned which time slots, while the timekeeper, often a respected elder, acted as an impartial referee, ensuring the gates opened and closed with ceremonial precision. This transparency was the bedrock of trust. It prevented the powerful from simply diverting the flow and ensured that even the smallest shareholder received their guaranteed portion. In some places, this legacy of hydrological justice is still alive today. In the oases of southern Morocco, for instance, traditional water courts still convene. Elders gather in a communal space, often under a specific tree, to hear disputes between farmers about alleged theft of water time or damage to a shared channel. They deliberate based on centuries-old customary law, their judgments focused on restoring balance to the community rather than simply punishing an individual. This practice underscores the profound cultural insight at the heart of the system. These societies understood that the resource itself was only half of the equation. The other, perhaps more vital half, was the equitable, transparent, and predictable framework for sharing it. The meticulous measurement of time was not about restriction, but about liberation. It transformed water from a potential flashpoint for conflict into a structured, reliable rhythm around which all of life could safely organize. In the silence of the desert, the most important sound was not the rush of water, but the collective agreement to count its seconds, ensuring that every field and every family had a place in the cycle. This mathematical covenant was what turned a hydraulic system into a lasting civilization. Yet, for all its elegant balance, this ancient covenant would eventually meet a force that measured time not in sinking bowls, but in the relentless revolutions of a drill bit. That mathematical covenant between a community and its water did more than feed people, it fed the very land. The final destination of a Kanat's flow was not merely a field, but an entire microclimate, a ribbon of life painstakingly stitched into the fabric of the desert. Picture the outlet where the cool, clear water first meets the air. From this single point, a transformation begins. The water seeps into the parched soil, and almost immediately, a different world emerges. A lush corridor of reeds and tamarisk trees follows the path of the surface channels, a vibrant green line drawn boldly against the endless tan expanse. This was no accident of irrigation, it was an act of unintentional ecosystem engineering. The Kanat created a sustained humid zone, a breath of moisture in a dry world. The constant evaporation from the canals and the transpiration from the dense plant life raised the local humidity and actually lowered the ambient temperature around the oasis. This microclimate did more than just make life more comfortable for farmers, it actively reshaped the local environment. It reduced the severity of dust storms by stabilizing the soil with root networks. It created a windbreak and a shaded understory, conditions that allowed for a layered agriculture otherwise impossible. Beneath the canopy of date palms, farmers could grow shade-tolerant crops like alfalfa, while fruit trees and vegetable plots thrived in the cooler, damper air along the water's edge. This artificial environment became a haven for biodiversity. The sound of flowing water and the shelter of greenery attracted insects, which in turn drew migratory birds. These avian visitors would rest and feed in these linear oases during their long journeys, their droppings helping to fertilize the soil and spread seeds, further enriching the plant diversity. Some ecologists suggest that the collective evapotranspiration from thousands of such oases could even have influenced very local rainfall patterns, creating a faint, positive feedback loop of moisture. The legacy of this ecological engineering is so profound that it can be seen from the air, even centuries later. In regions where Kanats have fallen silent, archaeologists and ecologists can still trace their ancient courses by following the distinctive, stubborn lines of vegetation that persist in the soil their moisture once blessed. This invites a powerful reflection. In our modern conversations about sustainability, we often speak of regenerative agriculture, of working with natural systems to heal the land. Look at the Kanat's legacy, not just its stone tunnels, but the green corridors it left behind. Was this ancient technology one of humanity's earliest and most successful experiments in regenerative design? It asked nothing of the desert but a slope and a hidden aquifer, and in return it crafted self-sustaining pockets of life that persisted for millennia. The Kanat's true yield was not merely a harvest of wheat or dates, but a harvest of living, breathing ecosystems, a testament to the idea that when we carefully manage water, we do not just cultivate crops, we cultivate life itself. A collapsed access shaft is a tomb for a river. In the quiet of the desert, you can find these openings, their stone linings crumbled inward, filled with centuries of wind-blown sand. They mark the final breath of a hidden lifeline, a point where the steady whisper of water gave way to permanent silence. The abandonment of these magnificent systems was not a single event, but a slow unraveling of the delicate balance that sustained them. One of the most profound pressures came from the world above. Periods of intense political instability or foreign invasion could shatter the social contract overnight. The intricate schedules, the communal cleaning duties, the authority of the water judge, all relied on a stable, functioning society. When conflict swept through a region, the first casualties were often order and shared purpose. The Muqannis might be conscripted or displaced. The ledgers of water shares could be lost or deliberately destroyed to seize control. Without the collective will to descend into the dark for maintenance, a Kanat could silt up or collapse within a few seasons. Its death was a direct result of a broken community. In other cases, the resource itself was exhausted. Recall the Garamantes mining their ancient fossil water. Their decline offers a stark lesson in drawing from a well that cannot refill. Even with the most careful management, a civilization built on a finite inheritance will eventually face the moment when the account runs dry. The water table sinks beyond the reach of the mother well, and the gentle gravity flow simply stops, leaving the tunnels as dry as the bones of the desert. But perhaps the most widespread challenge arrived with the roar of modern machinery. In the 20th century, the advent of powerful diesel and electric pumps changed everything. Suddenly, a single wealthy landowner could drill a deep tube well and extract water far faster than any Kanat could deliver. This was not a communal technology, it was an individual one. It promised immediate abundance, but at a hidden cost. Unregulated pumping caused water tables to plummet catastrophically, like a bathtub drain opened beneath an entire region. Countless Kanats whose mother wells had tapped the same aquifer for 1,000 years were left high and dry, their gentle slopes leading to nothing but dust. The social and economic landscape shifted beneath them as well, as global trade made imported food cheaper, and as younger generations moved to cities, the labor-intensive, community-based agriculture that the Kanat supported became less viable. The knowledge of the Muqannis, passed from father to son for generations, began to fade, becoming a relic rather than a respected craft. The silent death of a Kanat, therefore, is a multifaceted cautionary tale. It warns us that the most brilliant engineering is perpetually vulnerable. It depends on a stable social order to maintain it, on a sustainable relationship with the resource it exploits, and on an economic model that values the long-term rhythm over short-term gain. When we look into that collapsed shaft, we are not just seeing a failed tunnel. We are seeing the fragile intersection of water, stone, and human agreement, and a reminder that even the most robust adaptations to our environment are only as strong as the collective will to sustain them. The silent collapse of a Kanat shaft is a warning written in sand and stone. Today, that warning echoes in modern deserts, from the sun-baked Central Valley of California to the sprawling farmlands of Australia. Here, the crisis is not a lack of water, but a dangerous imbalance in how we retrieve it. Powerful pumps extract groundwater far faster than rain can replenish it, causing aquifers to shrink and the very land above them to sink. In our rush to solve scarcity with sheer force, we created a new problem of depletion. Yet, emerging solutions are beginning to sound remarkably familiar. They are rediscovering the ancient Kanat's core philosophy: work with the aquifer, don't just mine it. This is the principle behind Managed Aquifer Recharge, or MAR. Instead of only taking water out, these modern projects deliberately put water back in. During wet seasons, surplus water from rivers or treated stormwater is spread across large infiltration basins or directed into deep wells where it percolates down to recharge the depleted groundwater reserves. It is a high-tech mirror of the Kanat's sustainable relationship with the aquifer, acknowledging that the underground reservoir must be fed to remain a reliable source. The logic of gentle, gravity-fed flow is also seeing a revival. The Kanat's genius was in using a minimal slope to deliver a steady trickle directly to plant roots, minimizing waste. Today's drip irrigation systems operate on a strikingly similar principle, using low-pressure networks of tubes to deliver water precisely where and when it is needed, drop by drop. It is a marriage of ancient hydraulic wisdom and modern materials, achieving efficiencies that open canals could never match. Even architecture is looking back to stay cool. In an era of energy-intensive air conditioning, designers are revisiting passive cooling techniques inspired by desert adaptations. Modern buildings in arid climates now incorporate water features, shaded courtyards with reflective pools, and updated versions of wind catchers that use evaporative cooling to reduce reliance on electrical grids. These are not copies of the past, but evolutions of its core insight that water and airflow can be choreographed for comfort. Leading hydrologists and sustainability experts increasingly point to these traditional systems as invaluable case studies. They highlight the Kanat's low energy footprint, its resilience in the face of power outages, and perhaps most importantly, its foundation in community-based management. In a world facing both water stress and social fragmentation, the model of shared custodianship and transparent distribution holds profound lessons. It asks us a reflective question. In our pursuit of ever more complex technological fixes, have we inadvertently overlooked the elegant, time-tested simplicity of working within nature's gradients and cycles? The Kanat is far more than a historical artifact. It is a living philosophy of resource management, a testament to the power of patience, precision, and collective care. Its principles, born in antiquity, may well hold a key to designing a more sustainable and resilient future, reminding us that sometimes the most advanced solution is to remember how we first learned to listen to the earth. The desert floor holds its secrets well, but the view from orbit can make the invisible suddenly clear. Modern archaeologists no longer rely solely on shovels and trowels to find these lost waterways. They have become technological detectives, using the eyes of satellites to scan vast, empty landscapes for the faintest scars of ancient labor. From hundreds of kilometers above the Earth, High-resolution imagery reveals what the naked eye on the ground cannot see. Long, straight lines of slight depressions marching across the desert like a dotted stitch. These are the ghostly signatures of collapsed access shafts, the long-buried lungs of a Kanat, now visible only as a subtle textural difference in the sand and rock. In the hyper-arid expanse of the Libyan desert, this space-borne perspective has been revolutionary. Researchers analyzing satellite photos have identified the remnants of hundreds of previously unknown foggaras, the Garamantes subterranean channels. These discoveries are not just adding dots to a map, they are fundamentally rewriting our understanding of where and how that civilization lived. The patterns show that their agricultural settlements were far more extensive and interconnected than the ruins of Germa alone suggested, revealing a hidden lattice of farmsteads and way stations all sustained by this mined fossil water. This aerial detective work allows historians to piece together the true scale of ancient hydrological ambition without moving a single grain of sand, mapping empires from the shadows they cast from the past. The technological toolkit does not stop with satellites. Closer to the ground, drones equipped with specialized cameras add another layer of perception. Multispectral imaging can detect minute differences in plant health and soil moisture. A line of slightly greener, more robust vegetation snaking across an otherwise uniform plain often betrays the path of a buried Kanat channel, its lingering moisture still nurturing life centuries after the last water flowed. In Iran's Dasht-e-Lut desert, one of the hottest and most barren places on Earth, researchers have employed thermal imaging cameras at dawn. The principle is beautifully simple. Stone and earth cool and heat at different rates. The buried, stone-lined tunnel of an ancient Kanat retains temperature differently than the surrounding soil. At the right moment, just as the sun rises, a thermal scan can reveal a cool, linear streak beneath the surface, the spectral outline of a hidden riverbed sleeping beneath the blistering sands. For confirmation on the ground, there is ground-penetrating radar, or GPR. This device sends radio waves into the earth and maps the echoes that bounce back, creating a sonogram of the subsurface. It can reveal the distinct shape of a tunnel, the circular void of a filled shaft, or the collapse of a chamber, allowing archaeologists to precisely target their excavations and literally see into the earth before they dig. This fusion of old and new, of space-age technology illuminating Bronze Age ingenuity, underscores a humbling reality. The full extent of these ancient hydraulic empires is still coming to light. For every restored Kanat still flowing in Oman or Iran, there are dozens, perhaps hundreds, of lost systems waiting to be recognized. They are hidden in plain sight, their stories encoded in the alignment of a row of shrubs, the gentle dip of a desert track, or a thermal anomaly at daybreak. Each new discovery from the sky adds another chapter to our understanding of how profoundly our ancestors shaped their world, not by dominating the landscape, but by listening to its hidden logic. These technological detectives are not just finding tunnels, they are recovering a lost language of survival, written in water, stone, and the enduring patience of those who built for a future they would never see. A Persian poet once wrote of water that flows from the mountain's breast, a silver vein in the dark body of the earth. This was not mere metaphor, but a lived truth. The Kanat, in the minds of those it sustained, was never just a piece of infrastructure. It was a sacred thread woven into the very fabric of their cosmology, a symbol so potent it flowed from the soil into their stories, their art, and their deepest understanding of the world. In ancient Zoroastrian tradition, water was one of the 7 primal creations, an element of ritual purity. The Kanat, by delivering this pure, untouched water from deep within the earth, was seen as a direct conduit of that divine blessing. Its constant, reliable flow became an earthly echo of cosmic order, a physical manifestation of heavenly favor that made the desert bloom. This reverence translated into tangible art. On coins minted by the Sasanian Empire, you can sometimes see rulers depicted standing beside a flowing spring, a direct symbol of their legitimacy and their role as providers of life-giving water, likely sourced from a Kanat. In the exquisite miniature paintings of later periods, gardens are never just backgrounds. They are central subjects, meticulously detailed with central water channels that split the canvas into 4 harmonious quadrants. These are direct artistic representations of the charbagh, the Persian paradise garden, and they are literal blueprints of the Kanat's distributive principle, frozen in pigment and gold leaf. The technology inspired a rich folklore all its own. In tales passed down through generations, certain Kanats were said to be protected by spiritual beings like the Per or the Jinn. These guardians were not monsters but custodians. A tunnel that collapsed without obvious cause might be explained as the work of a displeased spirit, a narrative that reinforced the community's duty to maintain the channel with respect and care. The act of digging the Kanat itself took on mythic dimensions. Stories tell of heroic Muqannis who performed feats of navigation in the dark, guided by dreams or divine signs to find the hidden water. The mother well, the deepest point, was often spoken of with a hushed, almost maternal reverence as the literal womb from which the community's life emerged. This deep cultural embedding reveals a profound truth. A society does not lavish such artistic and narrative attention on something it views as a mere tool. The Kanat had transcended its function. It had become a core archetype, a symbol of fertility, resilience, and the hidden connections that sustain life. It represented the triumph of patient, cooperative human intelligence over chaotic nature. The garden was its ultimate artistic expression, but the symbol was everywhere. It flowed through epic poetry as a metaphor for life's journey, hidden at first, then emerging into light. It structured city plans and temple layouts. It provided the rhythmic, dependable backdrop against which all other cultural pursuits, poetry, astronomy, philosophy, could flourish. The water nourished the roots of the date palm, but the idea of the Kanat nourished the imagination. It taught that survival was not a brute struggle, but a careful partnership with the unseen rhythms of the earth. This cultural legacy may be the system's most enduring gift. It shows us that the most sustainable technologies are those that become inseparable from a people's identity and worldview, flowing as surely through their art as through their fields, reminding every generation that they are part of a continuum, drinking from the same hidden river that quenched the thirst of their ancestors. The hidden river fed more than crops. It nourished the intricate social fabric of daily life, a realm where women's expertise was the unseen current that turned water into community. While the dangerous labor of the Muqannis unfolded in the dark below, the world above the tunnel's outlet was profoundly shaped by women's knowledge and labor. Their domain began at the water's emergence, at the communal washing area known as the Hors or Sabil. This was far more than a utilitarian spot. Fed by a constant, clean flow from the Kanat, it became the social and informational heart of the village. Here, women gathered to wash clothes, fill household jars, and exchange news while their children played nearby. The sound of flowing water provided a backdrop for conversations that wove the community together, a space where the practical task of water collection doubled as the daily ritual of maintaining social bonds. Within the home, women exercised absolute authority over water management. They were the masters of conservation in a world where every drop was counted. This expertise manifested in ingenious daily practices. Cooking methods were designed to use minimal water, with stews and slow-cooked grains that maximized nutrition and hydration. They managed the household's water storage, knowing precisely how to keep clay jars cool and clean to prevent waste through evaporation or spoilage. In some cultures, this domestic mastery extended into formal rites. Historical records and oral traditions from regions like the Balochistan Plateau indicate that women could inherit specific water shares or sangs, especially those tied to household gardens, giving them direct economic agency rooted in the Kanat's flow. Their deep, localized knowledge also made them the primary herbalists and healers of the community. The microclimates created by the Kanat supported a unique pharmacopoeia of plants that thrived in the damp margins of the canals, mints, chamomiles, and various medicinal herbs. Women learned which plants could soothe a fever, treat a stomach ailment, or dress a wound, passing this botanical wisdom from mother to daughter. This was healthcare born directly from the hidden river's bounty, a vital layer of resilience that kept the community healthy. On certain ceremonial occasions, this gendered division of labor could blur in powerful symbolic acts. In some communities, during annual festivals marking the cleaning of the Kanat or the beginning of the agricultural season, women participated directly in distribution rituals. They might pour the first jar of water from the renewed flow onto the fields or share a ceremonial meal prepared with the season's first water, actions that recognized their role as the nurturers who transformed the raw resource into sustained life. This perspective fundamentally deepens our understanding of these hydraulic empires. The agricultural surplus that built cities and financed trade was not produced by the tunnel diggers alone. It was the result of a seamless collaboration. The men brought the water forth, and the women orchestrated its journey into the body, the home, and the social structure. One sphere could not function without the other. To overlook the daily, practiced expertise of women is to see only the skeleton of the system, missing the living tissue that made it a civilization. The history of the Kanat, therefore, is not merely a history of engineering. It is a social history written in the patterns of gathering at the washing stone, in the rhythms of water-conscious cooking, and in the quiet knowledge of which leaf heals. It reminds us that the most enduring technologies are those that empower every member of the community to become a steward, each contributing a different, essential note to the harmony of survival. A Roman aqueduct strides across the countryside on a forest of stone arches, a defiant declaration of human will against gravity and distance. Its water rushes openly, a captured river paraded high above the land, destined for the public baths, monumental fountains, and bustling latrines of an imperial city. It is power made visible, an unmistakable statement of centralized authority that shouts its achievement to the sky. Now hold that image in your mind and contrast it with the world of the Kanat. There are no soaring arches, only a line of subtle depressions in the sand. There is no roaring cascade, only a silent, cool trickle emerging from a mountainside, destined for the root zones of date palms and wheat fields. One system is a monument of the surface, the other a masterpiece of the subsurface. This is not a contest of which was better, but a fascinating lesson in how environment dictates the very soul of technology. Rome, blessed with ample rainfall in its hinterlands and a political imperative to supply dense urban populations, engineered for scale and spectacle. Its aqueducts were about concentration, gathering vast volumes from distant springs and channeling them with immense gravitational force into the heart of the metropolis. The water was for civic life, for hygiene, for grandeur, and for political theater. An abundant public flow demonstrated the empire's capacity to deliver not just survival, but luxury. The Kanat, born in the arid plateaus of Persia, answered a different, more urgent question, not how to enable urban luxury, but how to ensure rural survival. Its philosophy was one of conservation and patience, not conquest and display. It did not seek to move a river, but to gently persuade a hidden aquifer to share a small, perpetual portion of itself. The Kanat's genius was in its subtlety and sustainability. It minimized loss, protected its flow from the sun, and integrated directly with the agricultural landscape that fed the community. While a Roman aqueduct was a massive, centralized project funded and controlled by the state for urban centers, A Kanat was often a decentralized, community-managed system for sustaining the countryside. One was a spine feeding a single, mighty heart. The other was a capillary network feeding every cell of a distributed body. This fundamental difference shaped their cultural footprints. The aqueduct became an icon of Roman engineering, a symbol of imposed order on the landscape. The Kanat, meanwhile, became woven into the social and spiritual fabric of the community, a symbol of cooperation with the hidden rhythms of the earth. Both were brilliant adaptations, but they speak to us in different voices. The aqueduct's voice is the roar of water plunging into a public pool, a sound of imperial abundance. The Kanat's voice is the quiet, eternal whisper in a dark tunnel, a sound of communal endurance. One civilization built its legacy in stone upon the land, the other carved its covenant in the cool, silent dark beneath it. The water that filled a Kanat did not arrive in a sudden rush. It gathered slowly, molecule by molecule, in a silent process of persuasion. Deep within the mountain, rainfall and snowmelt from distant peaks would seep downward, navigating a labyrinth of tiny pores and cracks in the rock. This water did not flow in streams but percolated, moving with a patient gravity through layers of sand, gravel, and porous stone until it could go no further, pooling atop a dense, impermeable layer of clay or bedrock. This saturated zone is the aquifer, a hidden reservoir held within the Earth's own sponge. The Kanat's mother well was not a hole dug to find a mysterious underground river. It was a probe reaching down to deliberately intersect this soaked, gravel-filled zone. The tunnel itself, sloping gently away from this point, became a controlled drain. By providing an open path of least resistance, it invited the groundwater to begin a new journey, coaxing it to flow along the human-made channel instead of remaining trapped in the rock. This was the first layer of hydrological genius, understanding that water could be gently redirected, not forcibly extracted, but the system offered a second, vital gift: purification. As the water seeped from the surrounding aquifer into the open tunnel, it underwent a natural filtration process. The earth itself acted as a massive, slow filter. Particles of silt, potential contaminants from the surface, and even some harmful microorganisms were trapped in the dense matrix of soil and rock long before the water ever reached the tunnel. By the time it emerged at the distant outlet, it was often remarkably clear and cool, significantly cleaner than any surface pond or river. This was an unintentional yet profound form of pre-modern water treatment, a public health benefit engineered by geology itself. The builders demonstrated a sophisticated grasp of these principles through their choice of materials. In the sections of tunnel that passed through the water-bearing aquifer, they might leave the floor unlined or pack it with gravel. This encouraged maximum seepage into the channel, efficiently draining the aquifer like a carefully placed tile in a field. However, in the long, dry stretches of tunnel that carried the water across arid plains, the priority shifted to conservation. Here, the walls and floor would be meticulously sealed with a thick layer of packed clay called puddled clay. This created an impermeable barrier, preventing the precious water from leaking out into the thirsty, dry soil it traveled through. This dual approach reveals a nuanced understanding of subsurface hydrology. They were not just diggers, they were partners with the landscape, manipulating permeability to their advantage. They knew where to let the earth give water and where to make the earth hold it. This silent collaboration with physics is what made the Kanat sustainable. It required no pump, no external energy beyond the initial monumental labor. It operated on the natural hydraulic pressure of the aquifer itself, a pressure created by the weight of the water higher up in the hills. The system was a masterpiece of leverage, using the Earth's own gradients and properties to perform the work of lifting and moving water for free for centuries. In this light, the Kanat is more than a tunnel. It is a carefully calibrated interface between human need and geological process. It showcases a time when engineers listened to the whisper of water moving through stone and learned to write a civilization's destiny in the language of seepage and slope. That reliable trickle of water was a direct line to the treasury. The economic power of the Kanat began with a simple, transformative equation. Reliable water did not just prevent famine, it created a predictable, abundant surplus. This was the essential first step from mere survival to wealth generation. A farming family that knew with certainty how much water their fields would receive each week could plan beyond subsistence. They could confidently plant cash crops, knowing the investment of their labor would be rewarded with a harvest that could be sold or traded. This agricultural surplus became the foundational capital of the entire civilization. It fed not only the farmers but everyone else. With the basic need for food securely met by the Kanat-fed fields, society could diversify. Individuals were freed from working the land to specialize in other crafts. Potters could fire ceramics, weavers could produce textiles, and metalworkers could forge tools, all because the food they needed was reliably available in the market, grown with the hidden water. This specialization is a classic marker of economic advancement, and it was made possible by the steady, underground river. The surplus was also the primary source of taxable wealth for the state. Rulers could collect a portion of the grain, dates, or other produce as a tax in kind. This collected wealth then funded everything that defined an empire. It paid for the soldiers who defended the trade routes, the administrators who kept records and enforced laws, and the architects and laborers who built monumental palaces, temples, and fortified cities. The shimmering splendor of Persepolis or the rock-cut facades of Petra were not just artistic statements, they were economic statements, funded by the agricultural abundance engineered by the Kanat. The system created a stable, predictable economic base that could support large, concentrated urban populations far from any major river. Cities could grow because the countryside, thanks to the hidden water, could consistently feed them. The goods themselves became engines of long-distance trade. The Kanat did not just grow food, it grew luxury. Date palms, in particular, were a powerhouse. Their fruit was a dense, transportable source of sugar and calories, perfect for caravan journeys. Their wood was valuable, their leaves could be woven, and they provided shade for other crops. But the list extended far beyond dates. Kanat water irrigated fields of cotton, which could be spun into valuable textiles. It nurtured orchards that produced fruits like pomegranates and apricots, which could be dried and sold. It allowed for the cultivation of plants like indigo or saffron, used to produce precious dyes and spices. These were not bulk commodities, but high-value, low-weight goods ideal for the economics of the Silk Road. A single caravan load of saffron or silk, ultimately made possible by the steady water from a Kanat, could generate wealth equivalent to countless loads of grain. This transforms our view of the technology. The Kanat was far more than a survival tool. It was the original capital investment. The immense, upfront labor of digging the mother well and miles of tunnel was not an expense, it was an investment in future cash flow. It was like digging a mine, but one that produced a renewable stream of agricultural wealth year after year for centuries. The wealth of the Persian Empire, the Nabatean kingdom, and the Oasis cities of the Silk Road was not abstract. It was quite literal, a liquid asset. The silver coins, the fine silks, the incense and ivory traded in bustling markets, all ultimately flowed from those hidden channels. The Kanat built the economic resilience that allowed culture to flourish, turning hostile environments into cradles of art, architecture, and learning, all funded by the quiet, constant persuasion of water moving through stone. The clear water emerging from the mountain was never just a resource. It was a manifestation of grace, a liquid thread connecting the community to the divine. In cultures sustained by the Kanat, the line between the practical and the sacred was not simply blurred, it was erased. The source of the water, the mother well, was often treated as a hallowed site, a place where the hidden world of spirits met the human need for life. Ceremonies at the tunnel's outlet were common, especially at the start of the agricultural year or following the annual cleaning of the channels. A village elder or religious figure might offer prayers of gratitude, gently pouring the first jar of the renewed flow onto the roots of an ancient tree or into the community's primary basin, blessing the water for the season to come. Offerings of bread, salt, or flowers were sometimes placed at the water's edge, not as superstition, but as a ritual of reciprocity, a symbolic gift to the unseen forces that granted the water's favor. This practice transformed maintenance from a chore into a covenant, ensuring its care was a collective spiritual duty. Finding that water in the first place was an act of profound faith and intuition, often guided by methods that merged observation with omen. Before a single shovel struck the earth, diviners might walk the dry landscape. Some used dowsing rods, typically a forked branch from a willow or peach tree, holding it loosely before them as they paced. The theory was not one of magic but of sympathetic vibration, a belief that the hidden moisture could communicate with the living wood. Others practiced hydromancy, interpreting the patterns of oil dropped into a bowl of water, or sought guidance through dreams, believing answers would come in the quiet of the night. Perhaps the most widespread method relied on a deep reading of the natural world. A diviner would observe where certain insects gathered, where particular plants grew with unusual vigor, or where animals dug in the dry soil, interpreting these as signs of moisture far below. The selection of the mother well's location was therefore a decision suspended between geology and revelation, a moment where human need reached into the earth's secrets, guided by a blend of skill, tradition, and a humble acknowledgement that some knowledge lay beyond mere sight. This spiritual framework provided the ultimate sanction for the rules that governed daily water use. If water was a divine gift, then wasting or polluting it was not just inefficient, it was a form of sacrilege. Ancient legal codes and customary laws from Persia to Oman explicitly forbade contaminating a Kanat channel. Throwing refuse into an access shaft or washing in a way that dirtied the drinking supply was considered a serious offense against the community and the spiritual order. This cosmological backing gave the social and legal structures immense power. A farmer who stole a neighbor's water time was not merely breaking a civic rule, he was disrupting a sacred rhythm. The authority of the water judge was thus reinforced by a higher moral order, making compliance a matter of conscience as much as consequence. Conservation became embedded in cosmology, a daily practice of reverence. The Kanat, therefore, existed in a dual realm. It was a triumph of engineering, a precise application of slope and gravity. Simultaneously, it was a sacrament, a channel for both earthly sustenance and divine favor. The rituals at its source and the codes governing its use ensured that its management transcended mere practicality. It became a living expression of a culture's deepest values, a daily reminder that their survival depended on honoring an invisible covenant with the land and the forces that moved through it. This fusion of the technical and the spiritual may have been its most resilient feature, binding the community to its lifeline with bonds far stronger than stone or law alone could provide. The short-handled hoe was worn smooth by 1,000 grips. This simple tool, found in a collapsed access shaft, is a direct line to the hands that carved the hidden rivers. It speaks of a world measured in the scrape of metal on stone and the weight of lifted earth. Alongside it, archaeologists might find the remnants of a leather bucket, stiffened by time, used to haul spoil up the shaft, or a small ceramic lamp, its rim blackened by soot, that once pushed back the utter darkness of the tunnel face. These are the humble instruments of creation, the physical extensions of the Muqannis' will. They transform the idea of a Kanat from an engineering diagram into a story of relentless manual labor. But the material culture of water management extends far beyond the tunnel. At the surface outlet where the precious flow was divided, we find objects of remarkable sophistication. Carefully carved stone or bronze gauges, often with precise notches or channels, were used to measure water shares. These were not rough estimates but calibrated instruments, the desert's equivalent of a liquid clock. In some regions, small clay tokens have been unearthed, each representing a specific unit of water time. A farmer might present his token to the watermaster to claim his allotted period of irrigation. This token was a form of liquid currency, a tangible right to survival that could be held in the palm of the hand. The system's complexity demanded formal record-keeping. Legal documents etched onto stone stelae or written on parchment detail intricate water rights, inheritance laws, and penalties for stealing water or damaging a channel. One surviving document from ancient Persia stipulates the exact share of water from a specific Kanat that must be delivered to a temple garden in perpetuity. These texts show that the social contract was not merely oral tradition. It was codified law, as serious and binding as any treaty between kings. The intellectual backbone of the entire endeavor is preserved in manuscripts from the Islamic Golden Age. Scholars like Al-Karaji wrote exhaustive treatises on hydrology and engineering. Their pages contain meticulous geometric diagrams explaining how to calculate slopes, survey tunnel paths, and determine the volume of water flow. These are not philosophical musings but practical field manuals, combining advanced mathematics with hard-won empirical knowledge. They prove that Kanat construction was a scientific discipline, its principles studied, refined, and taught across generations. Each of these artifacts, from the humblest leather bucket to the most elegant geometric proof, serves as a vital counterpoint to the grand scale of empires and trade routes. They ground the narrative in touchable, human-scale history. The bronze gauge reminds us that fairness required precise measurement. The clay token tells us that access was a personal possession. The legal document underscores that cooperation was enforced by shared rules, and the worn handle of the hoe whispers of the individual endurance that made everything else possible. Together, this material culture assembles a mosaic of a civilization that understood its survival depended on a fusion of brute strength, legal precision, and intellectual rigor. It moves us from admiring an abstract feat of engineering to recognizing the countless individual actions, the recorded decisions, and the everyday objects that together persuaded a wasteland to bloom. A desert society's greatest fear is not the heat of a single day, but the silence of a dry sky that stretches for years. In the face of such climatic uncertainty, the Kanat was more than a water source, it was a profound act of insurance. While surface streams could vanish in a season and rain clouds could fail for a decade, the groundwater deep within a mountain aquifer often held a much longer memory. It collected precipitation not just from a single storm, but from years, sometimes centuries, of infiltration. The Kanat, by tapping into this deep reserve, accessed a buffer against time itself. During a prolonged drought, when open canals baked dry and crops withered in fields dependent on rain, the Kanat would often continue its steady, silent trickle. Its flow might diminish, but it rarely ceased entirely. This was because the underground tunnel acted as a shield. By moving the water beneath the earth, it eliminated the catastrophic evaporation losses that would have claimed every drop in an exposed channel under the scorching sun. The water that reached the fields was water that had been protected from the very climate crisis unfolding above. This inherent stability provided societies with a resilience that is difficult to overstate. Historical records and archaeological evidence suggest that regions with robust Kanat networks could endure periods of aridity that would have shattered less prepared communities. A village might see its rainfall fail for 3 or 4 years, yet its orchards could survive, its drinking water could remain secure, and its social order could hold. The Kanat bought them time, the most precious commodity in a drought. It prevented a single bad climatic period from triggering an immediate, irreversible collapse. This allowed for continuity, for the preservation of knowledge, and for the hope that the rains would eventually return. The technology was, in essence, a climate adaptation strategy crafted in stone and patience. At its core, building a Kanat was a declaration of faith in the future. The labor was monumental, often taking decades to complete a single system. The master Muqanni who began the tunnel would likely never see its water reach the distant fields. He was not digging for his own harvest, but for the harvests of his grandchildren and their grandchildren after them. This multi-generational perspective is perhaps the most radical aspect of the Kanat's design. It was an investment in security that transcended a single lifetime, a collective decision to sacrifice present effort for future certainty. The community was not just building an irrigation channel, it was building a legacy of resilience, embedding a promise of survival into the landscape itself. In our current era of accelerating climate change, with its intensifying droughts and unpredictable water cycles, this ancient characteristic of resilience resonates with urgent clarity. Modern water infrastructure often relies on massive, centralized systems, dams that silt up, canals that evaporate, and deep wells that rapidly drain aquifers. These are solutions of abundance engineered for a world of assumed plenty. The Kanat, by contrast, was engineered for scarcity and variability. It was a bet not on the consistency of the sky, but on the slow, stable rhythms of the deep earth. It asked how to persist through the bad years, not just how to flourish in the good ones. This shift in perspective, from controlling water to carefully partnering with its hidden, long-term sources, may be one of the most vital lessons whispered up from those dark tunnels. The Kanat teaches us that true security is not found in dominating the environment, but in understanding its deepest buffers and building a society humble enough to invest in them for generations yet unborn. The gentle slope of a water channel became the guiding line for an entire civilization's sense of beauty. In the world of the Kanat, form was never separate from function. It was its direct and elegant consequence. The strict, unforgiving demands of desert survival gave birth to an aesthetic language so coherent it shaped everything from the humblest alley to the grandest palace garden. Take the simple need for shade. Water evaporating from an open canal provided coolness, but to protect that water and the people using it from the blistering sun, builders began to span the channels with stone slabs or wooden beams. Over time, these covered waterways evolved into the shaded corridors of the traditional bazaar. The cool, dim passageways of markets from Isfahan to Marrakech are not merely pleasant architectural features. They are the direct descendants of hydrological necessity, their vaulted ceilings born from the need to shield a precious resource. The sound of that flowing water, a constant whisper in the dry air, was not background noise. It was a sensory confirmation of life and order. This sound became so deeply desired that it was deliberately engineered into the heart of domestic and public design. In the Persian garden, water was never still. It was made to flow over stepped chadars or water stairs, creating a soft, continuous murmur that masked the harshness of the desert wind and provided an oral anchor of tranquility. Inside homes, a small channel might be directed through a courtyard solely for its cooling sound, turning a functional delivery system into a source of private, auditory pleasure. This pursuit of order extended to geometry. The absolute requirement for fair water distribution demanded mathematical precision. A main channel would split into 2, then 4, then 8 smaller channels, each division governed by a calibrated gate. This principle of equitable bifurcation found its ultimate expression in the charbagh, the Persian paradise garden. These gardens are laid out as perfect quadrants, divided by 4 water channels that symbolize the 4 rivers of life. The rigid, symmetrical geometry is not an abstract artistic choice. It is a direct translation of hydrological justice into landscape form. It visualizes the fair and logical distribution of the life-giving flow. Even the pattern left on the land by the Kanat itself held a stark beauty. The line of vertical access shafts, when properly maintained, created a rhythmic series of depressions or small mounds of excavated earth across the plains. From a distance, these punctuated the barren landscape with a deliberate, almost musical rhythm, a visible testament to the hidden order running beneath. In these societies, beauty was not an added luxury applied after survival was secured. It was an emergent property, a natural byproduct of systems refined to their most efficient, life-sustaining state. The covered alley, the murmuring garden, the symmetrical quadrant, the rhythmic line of shafts, each was a solution that also pleased the senses. This invites a powerful reflection. Does extreme constraint, the relentless pressure of necessity, sometimes breed the most profound and enduring creativity? The empires built on hidden water left behind an aesthetic legacy that continues to captivate us, not in spite of its practical origins, but precisely because it was forged in that crucible. Their beauty feels authentic, inevitable, because every graceful line began as an answer to a vital question of survival. The memory of the community was its first legal code. Before any law was written on parchment or carved in stone, it lived in the precise recitations of village elders gathered at the water's edge. These men held the entire hydrological order of the valley in their minds, the exact rotation schedule, the inherited shares measured in minutes, the boundaries of responsibility for cleaning each tunnel segment. This oral tradition was a living library, recited annually to reaffirm the covenant between every family and the hidden river. Its authority rested on collective memory and mutual survival, a system elegant in its simplicity but vulnerable to the frailties of human recollection and the ambitions of power. As Kanat networks expanded, feeding not just villages but entire provinces, this localized custom had to evolve. The stakes were too high for ambiguity. The transformation of water law from unwritten tradition into formal imperial code was a quiet revolution, one that turned a community's lifeline into an empire's backbone. The Achaemenid Persians, masters of administration, were among the first to grasp this necessity. In an empire spanning from the Indus Valley to the Aegean Sea, consistency was paramount. Surviving clay tablets and inscriptions reveal that the imperial bureaucracy took a direct interest in water management. Royal decrees could mandate the construction of new qanats in arid provinces, seeing them as engines of settlement and tax revenue. More importantly, they began to standardize the rules. Imperial inspectors might be dispatched to audit water usage in key agricultural regions, ensuring that local allocations matched the recorded shares on the central ledger. Disputes between powerful landowners over water diversion could be appealed to regional satraps or governors, whose judgments were enforced by the crown's authority. This was a crucial shift. Water law was no longer just local custom. It was a matter of state policy, integrated into the vast machinery of imperial governance. The predictable flow of water enabled a predictable flow of grain into the royal granaries, and the law existed to protect that vital economic current. This legal sophistication reached its zenith under Islamic rule, particularly during the Abbasid Caliphate. Islamic jurisprudence, or fiqh, developed an exceptionally detailed classification of water rights, distinguishing between different sources. Water from a great river was treated differently than water from a small spring, but the Kanat or Kana held a special place. Scholars and judges produced comprehensive legal manuals that addressed every conceivable aspect. These laws meticulously defined who owned the water in a Kanat, often the person who funded its original excavation, and how those rights could be inherited, sold, or divided. They laid out strict maintenance responsibilities, specifying that all shareholders must contribute labor or funds to keep the tunnel clear, with penalties for neglect that could endanger the entire community. Pollution was a serious offense. The codes explicitly forbade washing clothes, watering animals, or disposing of waste in a way that would contaminate the drinking supply, recognizing that the health of the population depended on the purity of the hidden flow. To adjudicate this complex web of rights and responsibilities, specialized institutions emerged. In Persia, the Divan-e-Ab, or water court, became a powerful and respected body. Presided over by a chief judge, the Qazi, who was often a trained hydraulic engineer as well as a legal scholar, this court handled disputes that village elders could not resolve. Its proceedings were based on evidence, witness testimony, and the examination of the physical infrastructure itself. A judge might descend into a Kanat to inspect a disputed section of wall or consult ancient allocation charts. The goal was restorative justice, to repair the social and physical breach and restore the equitable flow. Similar systems flourished in Al-Andalus and across the Islamic world, creating a predictable legal environment where a farmer could invest decades in cultivating an orchard, secure in the knowledge that his water right was defendable in a court of law. This evolution from oral custom to written code reveals a profound truth about these hydraulic empires. The brilliant engineering of the tunnel was only half of the invention. The other, equally brilliant half was the legal and social framework built around it. The law provided the stability that transformed the Kanat from a clever local solution into a scalable, enduring institution. It turned water from a potential source of conflict into a foundation for long-term agricultural investment and economic growth. The silent flow underground required a loud and clear covenant above ground, one that could be recorded, debated, and enforced. This was the true glue of the system, demonstrating that no technology, no matter how ingenious, can long survive without a parallel architecture of human agreement, one that bends and adapts as surely as water finds its own path through stone. A world built on hidden water was never truly silent. If you were to kneel at the rim of a deep access shaft, leaning into the cool, damp air rising from below, you would hear it. From the profound darkness, a faint, echoing trickle, a sound like distant rain falling on stone. That was the heartbeat of the entire system, the quiet, persistent proof that the hidden river was still alive and moving in its subterranean course. In the vast, wind-scoured silence of the desert, this sound was a profound anchor. It was not just noise, it was information. For the Muqanni descending on his rope, the acoustics of the shaft were his first diagnostic tool. The clarity and strength of that trickle told him if the flow was healthy or if a collapse upstream had choked the channel. The sound oriented him in the absolute blackness, a liquid thread he could follow with his ears long before his lamp illuminated the tunnel walls. At the surface, where the water finally emerged into the light, the sound transformed. The isolated trickle multiplied into a cheerful, constant babble as the water split into the network of shallow jubs or canals that fed the fields. This became the defining soundtrack of the Oasis community. In the narrow, shaded lanes of a desert town, the gentle murmur of flowing water was as much a part of the atmosphere as the scent of damp earth and blooming jasmine. It was a sensory confirmation of security, a sound that meant the gardens were drinking, the children could play, and the community would eat. This auditory landscape was so integral that people learned to read its nuances. A change in the water's song could signal a problem. A sudden, worrying quiet from a normally chattering channel might mean a blockage or an illegal diversion upstream, sending a farmer running to check his share. In some cultures, this relationship between sound and flow was formalized into a kind of hydraulic music. There are accounts, particularly from North Africa and the Middle East, of using the acoustic properties of specially shaped ceramic pots placed in the watercourse. As the flow passed through or over them, the pots would emit a specific hum or gurgle. The pitch and volume of this sound provided an audible measure of the water's speed and volume, a simple yet ingenious form of continuous monitoring. To focus on this soundscape is to recover a deeply human dimension of the technology. It moves the Kanat from a sterile diagram in an engineering textbook back into the realm of lived sensory experience. For the child falling asleep to its whisper outside her window, for the woman washing clothes at the communal basin to its rhythm, for the elder who could diagnose the health of the valley by listening to its chorus at dawn, the Kanat was not a silent monument. It was a companion with a voice. It whispered of deep time from the access shaft, gurgled with abundance at the outlet, and sang a steady, reassuring song of continuity through the canals. That sound was the melody of a covenant kept, the audible proof that in the stillness of the desert, life had found not just a way to survive, but a way to sing about it. That steady whisper of water did more than fill irrigation channels. It filled dinner plates with a diversity once unimaginable in the desert. Before the hidden river, survival in these arid zones was a precarious balancing act. Diets were lean and monotonous, heavily reliant on the milk and meat of herds that could wander to find scant pasture, or on the few, tough plants that could endure the blistering sun and sporadic rain, things like drought-resistant millets or wild, bitter greens. Nutrition was a constant gamble, with famines a recurring shadow when the rains failed or the pastures withered. The Kanat changed the biological equation of an entire region. With a guaranteed, scheduled flow of water, farmers could shift from mere survival gardening to deliberate, diversified agriculture. They began to cultivate water-intensive staple grains that were previously impossible. Fields of wheat and barley, which require consistent moisture during their growing cycle, suddenly flourished in the desert's heart. These grains provided a reliable source of carbohydrates, the foundational calories that could support a larger, settled population. But the transformation went far beyond bread. The same channels that fed the grain fields also branched off to nourish kitchen gardens. Here, the Kanat's gift enabled a revolution in micronutrients. Farmers could now grow protein-rich legumes like lentils, chickpeas, and broad beans. They cultivated a cornucopia of fruits and vegetables, crisp cucumbers, leafy greens, onions, and carrots. Orchards of date palms, pomegranates, figs, and grapes thrived along the water's path. Each new crop added a vital piece to the nutritional puzzle. Dates offered dense, transportable energy and essential minerals. Pomegranates and citrus fruits provided vitamin C, preventing deficiency. Legumes delivered plant-based protein, building and repairing tissue. This dietary diversification was a silent public health miracle. It meant stronger immune systems, better childhood development, and greater resilience against illness. The effects were visible in the population itself. Archaeological studies of remains from Kanat-sustained societies often show evidence of better overall health and reduced signs of dietary stress compared to earlier periods or contemporary groups in non-irrigated areas. The robust physical stature needed to build empires was quite literally grown with this hidden water. This abundance also created the possibility of luxury and craft. Surplus grapes could be fermented into wine, a valuable trade good and a cultural staple. Certain fruits could be processed into sugars or syrups. Beekeeping flourished in the blossoming orchards, providing honey. The stable, rich food base meant not everyone had to farm. It supported the artisans, soldiers, merchants, and scholars who defined a complex civilization. The Kanat, therefore, engineered more than just an oasis. It engineered the very vitality of the people who lived there, turning a landscape of scarcity into a cradle of biological resilience, where the hidden flow of water became, quite directly, the visible flow of life into generations of thriving communities. The water's journey was not complete when it left the tunnel. Emerging from the mountainside into the brilliant light, the clear stream now entered a second, equally deliberate world of geometry and control. This was the surface distribution network, a visible web of canals and channels that transformed the Kanat's steady trickle into a precise instrument of cultivation. It began at the mashtab, the main outlet where the water collected in a wide, shallow basin. From this point, a primary canal, often lined with stone or packed clay, carried the flow toward the waiting fields. This was the main artery, and its path was the first decision in a daily puzzle of allocation. The system's genius lay in its branching logic. The primary canal would soon meet a divider, a simple stone or wooden gate. With a careful adjustment, the watermaster could split the flow, sending one portion down a secondary channel to the north, the other to the south. Each of these channels would then split again and again, creating a fractal pattern of ever smaller waterways that eventually became the narrow field channels, or jubs, that ran along the edges of individual plots. The entire landscape was etched with this hydraulic handwriting, a map of water rights written directly into the earth. The gates themselves were marvels of simple precision. Often just a flat stone slab or a wooden plank that could be slid into a groove in the canal wall, they allowed for minute adjustments. Raising the gate a finger's width would increase the flow to a downstream shareholder by a measurable amount, a delicate calibration that everyone in the community understood. On sloping terrain, this geometry became three-dimensional. To irrigate terraced fields carved into hillsides, builders constructed small check dams across the channels. These were not massive barriers, but low walls of rock and earth. Their purpose was not to stop the water, but to slow it. By creating a series of small, temporary pools, the dams allowed the water to spread laterally, soaking evenly across the entire width of a terrace before spilling gently over the dam to the level below. This prevented erosion and ensured every plant, from the highest terrace to the lowest, received its share. The layout was a masterpiece of practical surveying, requiring an understanding of slopes and volumes just as nuanced as that needed for the underground tunnel. A miscalculation could mean a dry field for one family and a flooded one for another, disrupting the fragile social balance. This visible network was the logical, necessary extension of the hidden one. The Kanat delivered the water to the valley, but this surface geometry delivered it to the root. Every turn in a canal, every placement of a gate, every small check dam was part of a grand communal calculation. It was a system designed for absolute fairness under a relentless sun. The watermaster's schedule dictated which gate would be opened, and for how long, according to ancient shares that might be measured in minutes per week. When your family's time arrived, you would guide the life-giving flow into your field channels, watching it spread through the carefully leveled furrows to nourish the thirsty roots of your wheat or the base of your date palms. The success of the entire subterranean endeavor, the decades of digging, the perilous labor in the dark, was ultimately realized in this quiet, daily moment. The hidden river's promise was fulfilled not in a roaring cascade, but in the silent, perfect saturation of soil around a single plant, made possible by an elegant, visible mathematics of distribution carved into the face of the land. Yet for all we have mapped and measured, the desert still keeps its deepest secrets. Scattered across the ancient landscapes are the ghosts of Kanats that defy our understanding, their logic lost to time. There are systems where archaeologists have traced the line of access shafts for kilometers, only to find the mother well, the supposed starting point, nowhere to be found. The tunnel simply begins in the middle of a plain, its source a mystery. Did the builders tap a water source that has since vanished completely, or was their surveying method so different from our own that its origin point makes no sense to modern eyes? Other tunnels take bewildering, serpentine paths, winding in great arcs when a straight line would seem more efficient. Were these detours forced by hidden geological faults or pockets of unstable rock that the Muqannis, listening to the earth with their picks, knew to avoid? Or could some of these winding paths have held a symbolic meaning, tracing a sacred pattern on a scale so vast it can only be perceived from the conceptual heights of the culture that designed it? These are not just engineering puzzles, they are silent conversations with a lost mindset. The mystery deepens when we look at a map of the ancient world. We find strikingly similar subterranean channels in the high deserts of Peru, known as puquios, and in the arid Canary Islands. The most compelling question arises in the Turpan Basin of western China, home to the magnificent Kores systems. Did this technology travel the entire length of the Silk Road, passed from engineer to engineer? Or did the Uyghur people of Turpan, facing an identical environmental crisis, arrive at an identical solution through pure parallel ingenuity? The transmission path, if there was one, remains hazy, a story told in whispers rather than written records. Some researchers point to tantalizing clues, like the discovery of Persian-style ceramic liners in early Chinese Kores tunnels, suggesting a transfer of knowledge. Others argue the principle is simple enough to have been reinvented wherever desperate need met a sloping landscape. The truth may lie in a combination, a seed of an idea carried by trade winds, which then took root and blossomed into a uniquely local form of genius. Perhaps the most poetic mysteries are those written in alignment with the heavens. A handful of Kanat systems, upon careful modern surveying, show their primary tunnels or major distribution points are oriented not just toward water, but toward specific celestial events. A main channel might point directly to the rising point of a significant star on the solstice, or an access shaft might be positioned to catch the light of the full moon on a single night of the year. Was this astronomical alignment a practical tool for surveying and marking the annual calendar for water allocation? Or did it reflect a deeper cosmology, where the life-giving water from below was ceremonially connected to the cyclical order of the sky above? The purpose remains speculative, a layer of meaning that has evaporated, leaving only a tantalizing geometric clue behind. These unanswered questions are not failures of scholarship. They are the very elements that keep the story alive and breathing. They remind us that our understanding of the past is always a work in progress, a dialogue between what we find and what we can humbly infer. Each collapsed shaft cleared, each satellite image analyzed, each soil sample taken from a tunnel floor has the potential to rewrite a paragraph of this ancient narrative. The full story of how humanity turned wastelands into gardens with nothing but gravity and grit is not a closed book. It is a manuscript still being unearthed word by word from the silent, patient earth. Every mystery invites us to look deeper, to listen more closely to the echoes in the dark, and to remember that the most profound achievements of our ancestors often hold one final lesson, that there is always more to discover. A desert is never truly empty. To the untrained eye, it is a blank page, a sea of sand and rock stretching toward a shimmering horizon. But for those who know how to look, that same landscape is a historical document, its surface inscribed with the faded handwriting of ancient engineers. The empires built on hidden rivers may have vanished, but they left a permanent signature in the earth, a text written not in ink, but in subtle disruptions of soil and stubborn lines of life. Learning to read this text transforms a wasteland into a library, where every gentle depression tells a story of water and will. The most common clue is a pattern that seems almost too orderly for nature. Look across a flat plain. Do you see a straight line of circular pits or shallow bowls, spaced evenly apart like stitches on a seam? These are the ghostly remains of access shafts, the vertical lungs of a long-dead Kanat. Over centuries, their stone linings have crumbled inward, and wind has filled them with sand, but they retain their distinctive shape. From the ground, they might appear as a faint chain of shadows at dawn or dusk. From above, in satellite imagery, they emerge with startling clarity, a dotted line marching resolutely across the desert, pointing directly from a distant mountain foothill toward the ruins of an old settlement. This line is the skeleton of the system, the bare bones of its ambition still visible after 1,000 years. Vegetation holds another layer of the story. In a hyper-arid zone, plants cluster wherever they can find moisture. Sometimes they reveal the hidden geometry of the past. You might see a row of tamarisk trees or a thicket of reeds growing in an unnaturally straight line across an otherwise barren valley. This green stripe often traces the path of the buried water channel, its roots still tapping into the faint, lingering dampness trapped in the old tunnel's floor. In other places, look for a single, thriving cluster of trees or shrubs in the middle of nowhere. This lush island might mark the location of a former surface outlet, where water once spilled into a basin, enriching the soil in that one spot for generations after the flow ceased. The desert's flora becomes a living map, its green ink highlighting the contours of a vanished hydrological system. Human artifacts provide the final, confirming punctuation. Scattered near a dry, linear depression, you might find the broken remnants of a millstone or the foundation stones of a small building. Why would a mill be built in the middle of a desert? The answer whispers of a time when this was not a desert at all, but a productive farm. The water from the Kanat would have been used not just for irrigation, but to turn a grinding wheel for grain or to power simple machinery for pressing olives or crushing sugarcane. A pile of worn pottery shards near a certain point might indicate a former settlement's communal washing area, fed by the reliable flow. These objects are the exclamation points in the desert sentence, the tangible proof that what is now silent and dry was once a place of industry, community, and life. This literacy is a form of quiet archaeology, available to anyone who pauses to truly see. It empowers us to look at a seemingly lifeless expanse and perceive the layers of history beneath. That line of depressions is not a random quirk of erosion. It is the footprint of a Muqanni's daily journey, lowering his bucket into the dark. That straight row of green is not an accident. It is the lingering echo of a watermaster's careful calculations. To read this text is to engage in a conversation across centuries, to recognize that the most profound human achievements are not always towers and temples. Sometimes they are the gentle, patient imprints we leave on the land itself, subtle instructions for how to find water and life in the most unexpected places. The desert keeps its secrets, but it is willing to share them with those who know the language. From the first mother well struck in Persia to the last Kharez tunnel carved in China, these hidden rivers were never just about water. They were about possibility. They were the quiet, persistent argument that a wasteland could be a home, that scarcity could be met not with flight, but with profound, patient ingenuity. We have traced their course not only through rock and sand, but through the very fabric of civilization. They were the engines that powered agricultural economies, turning desert margins into exporters of silk and spice. They were the blueprints that drafted social contracts, teaching communities that fairness and shared labor were the price of survival. They were the wellsprings that inspired art, law, and architecture, proving that beauty often emerges from the strictest demands of necessity. Their silent flow carried more than moisture. It carried the seeds of empire, culture, and a way of life built on a covenant with the unseen. In our modern age, defined by towering dams, sprawling pipelines, and energy-intensive pumps, the Kanat's legacy poses a gentle but profound challenge. It asks us to reconsider what we mean by advanced technology. Is it the most powerful extraction or the most elegant integration? The Kanat achieved staggering feats of hydraulic engineering without a single watt of electricity, relying instead on a deep understanding of gravity, geology, and time. It was sustainable not as an afterthought, but as its first principle, designed to work within the Earth's cycles for 1,000 years. This ancient system whispers a crucial lesson for our own era of climate uncertainty and resource strain. Resilience is not found in dominating nature, but in listening to its logic and building our societies within its rhythms. The true power of the hidden river was always in its harmony. As global pressures on freshwater intensify, the quiet wisdom of the Muqanni and the water judge feels more relevant than ever. Their model reminds us that security lies in community stewardship, in equitable distribution, and in infrastructure that serves generations, not just quarterly reports. The desert empires teach us that the most enduring solutions are often those that are humble, decentralized, and woven into the cultural and ecological fabric of a place. They did not conquer the desert, they conversed with it, and in that dialogue they found a way to make it bloom. If this journey into the depths of history has illuminated the hidden connections between water, stone, and human ingenuity for you, we invite you to join us for more explorations of humanity's forgotten wonders. Let us know in the comments which ancient marvel you would like to uncover next.